Silence is often the loudest scream a woman can make, especially when she holds the keys to the kingdom. Everyone thought Victoria was just the trophy wife standing in the shadow of her husband, the brilliant CEO Preston Langley. They thought she was lucky to even be in the room. But on the night of their 10th anniversary gala, one glimpse of a secret behind a closed door changed everything. Victoria didn't scream. She didn't fight. She simply walked away. Why? Because while Preston was busy holding his mistress's baby, he forgot one crucial detail. He didn't own the company. Victoria did. And she was about to remind him that in the business of revenge, she was the majority shareholder. Champagne bubbles usually signaled celebration, but tonight they tasted like copper and old lies. Victoria Pembroke stood on the mezzanine of the Grand Hotel Sinclair, looking down at the sea of tuxedos and designer gowns swirling below. It was the 10th anniversary of Langley Global, the tech conglomerate that the world believed her husband, Preston Langley, had built from the ground up with his bare hands and sheer grit. Victoria adjusted the emerald strap of her gown. It was a vintage piece, unassuming to the untrained eye but worth more than the luxury sports car parked in the valet lot downstairs. That was Victoria's way. She preferred power that whispered rather than shouted. "He's looking for you, Mrs. Langley," a voice said from her left. Victoria turned to see Arthur Pendleton, the company's oldest legal counsel, and perhaps the only man in the room who knew where all the bodies were buried. Arthur held a cane in one hand and a scotch in the other. His eyes, usually sharp, looked tired. "Is he?" Victoria replied, her voice cool. "I assumed Preston was busy accepting accolades for the new microprocessor launch. He does love a spotlight, doesn't he, Arthur?" Arthur didn't smile. "The spotlight has a way of blinding people to what's happening in the dark, Victoria. You should go find him." He went toward the VIP suites about 20 minutes ago. Said he needed to take an urgent call from the Singapore investors. Something in Arthur's tone made the hair on Victoria's arms stand up. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a warning. Arthur had been her father's attorney before he was Preston's. He knew the intricate web of the Pembroke estate better than anyone. "Thank you, Arthur," she said softly. Victoria descended the marble staircase, navigating the crowd with practiced grace. She accepted compliments on her husband's success with a polite nod, dodging grasping hands that wanted to be close to the first lady of the tech world. But her mind was racing. Preston hadn't mentioned Singapore. In fact, he had explicitly told her that tonight was about them, about celebrating a decade of dominance. She reached the corridor leading to the private suites. The noise of the gala faded into a muffled hum, replaced by the soft thud of her heels on the plush carpet. The hallway was empty, save for a waiter clearing a tray of untouched hors d'oeuvres. Suite 404. That was the company suite kept for high-level negotiations. The door was slightly ajar. A sliver of golden light spilled onto the carpet. Victoria reached for the handle, intending to push it open and congratulate her husband on whatever deal he was closing. Then she heard it. It wasn't the aggressive baritone of a business negotiation. It was a soft, cooing sound, a sound she hadn't heard from Preston in years, not since they had stopped trying to conceive. "Look at him, Preston. He has your nose." The female voice was young, breathless, and terrifyingly familiar. It belonged to Chloe Sinclair, the 24-year-old marketing intern Preston had hired 6 months ago, for her fresh perspective. Victoria froze. Her hand hovered over the brass handle. "He does," Preston's voice murmured, thick with an emotion Victoria had been starving for. "He's perfect. My son. My actual legacy." Victoria pushed the door open just another inch. The angle was cruel in its perfection. Preston was sitting on the velvet sofa, his jacket discarded, his tie loosened. In his arms he held a bundle wrapped in blue cashmere. He was rocking it gently, a look of pure, unadulterated adoration on his face. Sitting next to him, with a hand resting possessively on his knee, was Chloe. She looked radiant, triumphant, and completely at home. "When are you going to tell her?" Chloe asked, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried like a gunshot in the silence. "The divorce papers have been ready for weeks, Preston. You promised. Now that Leo is here, we can't keep living in the shadows. I want my son to have his father." Preston sighed, shifting the baby, his son, to his other arm. "Tonight was supposed to be the night, Chloe, but the stock price hit a record high. If I announce a divorce now, the board might get jittery. I need to secure the vote next week. Once I have total control of the board, I'll cut her loose. She's useful for the image, but she's barren, Chloe. A man like me needs an heir." Barren. The word hit Victoria harder than a physical blow. They had tried for years. The doctors had said it was unexplained infertility on both sides, stress-related. But Preston had weaponized it. He had looked at her with pity, then resentment, and finally, indifference. Victoria watched as Preston kissed the top of the baby's head, then leaned over to kiss Chloe. It wasn't a peck. It was the kiss of a man who had already moved on, a man who had built a second life right under the nose of the woman who washed his shirts and managed his social calendar. Rage, hot and molten, flared in her chest. She wanted to kick the door open. She wanted to scream, to flip the table, to shatter the domestic bliss they had stolen from her. She wanted to ruin him. But Victoria Pembroke was not a woman who made scenes. She was a woman who made strategies. She slowly pulled her phone from her clutch. With a steady hand that defied the earthquake in her heart, she aimed the camera through the crack in the door. Click, a photo of the happy family. Click, a video of Preston promising to cut her loose. She recorded 10 seconds of damning evidence. Preston admitting to the affair. Preston admitting the child was his. Preston admitting he was manipulating the board. "I love you, Preston," Chloe cooed. "I love you too. Both of you. Soon it'll just be us. Victoria will be a memory. I'll give her the beach house and a payout, and she'll go quietly. She doesn't have the stomach for a fight." Victoria lowered the phone. A cold, terrifying calm washed over her. It was the same calm she felt before closing a hostile takeover. The same calm her father had possessed when he dismantled his competitors in the 80s. She doesn't have the stomach for a fight? Victoria stepped back, ensuring the floorboards didn't creak. She turned around and walked back down the hallway. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She checked her makeup in a hallway mirror, reapplied her lipstick, a shade called blood red, and walked back into the gala. She found Arthur Pendleton near the bar. "Arthur," she said, her voice devoid of tremors. "Victoria?" Arthur looked at her, concerned. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "No," Victoria replied, picking up a glass of champagne. "I saw the future, Arthur, and it requires a restructuring. I need you to convene an emergency meeting with the trustees of the Pembroke Trust. Tonight? Midnight?" Arthur's eyes widened. He looked at the steel in her gaze and understood immediately that the time for warnings was over. "I'll have the car ready in 10 minutes, Arthur said. Victoria took a sip of the champagne. It no longer tasted like old lies. It tasted like war. The penthouse was silent when Preston finally stumbled in at 3:00 a.m. The gala had been a roaring success, followed by an after-party that Victoria had conspicuously absented herself from. Victoria was sitting in the high-backed leather chair in his study, facing the door. The only light came from the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her, casting her in silhouette. Preston startled when he flipped the light switch. "Jesus, Victoria, you nearly gave me a heart attack. Why are you sitting in the dark?" He reeked of scotch and that cloying vanilla perfume Chloe wore. He loosened his tie, the same tie she had seen him wearing while holding his secret son, and threw it onto the desk. "We need to talk, Preston," Victoria said. She didn't stand up. She remained seated, her hands folded calmly in her lap. Preston groaned, rubbing his temples. "Can we not do this now? I've had a long night. The investors were eating out of the palm of my hand, no thanks to you." "Where did you go?" "It looked bad, Victoria. My wife, vanishing during the toast." "I was feeling nauseous," she lied smoothly. "Something I saw didn't agree with me." Preston scoffed, walking over to the sidebar to pour himself a nightcap. "You're always sensitive. You need to toughen up if you're going to be by my side during this expansion." "Is that what we're doing? Expanding?" Preston froze for a microsecond, the ice tongs hovering over his glass. He turned to look at her, a mask of annoyance slipping into place. "What is that supposed to mean?" "I mean," Victoria said, standing up slowly, "that families expand, Preston. Businesses merge. I'm just wondering which one you're prioritizing." Preston laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "You're speaking in riddles. Go to bed, Victoria. You're tired." "I know about Chloe." The silence that followed was absolute. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic. It all vanished. Preston set his glass down. He didn't look panicked. He looked relieved, arrogant. "Well," he said, turning fully to face her. He leaned against the sidebar, crossing his arms. "I suppose that saves me the trouble of finding the right time to tell you." Victoria felt a flicker of pain, but she smothered it instantly. "So it's true. The intern. And the child?" Preston's eyebrows shot up. "You know about Leo. You've been spying on me." He shook his head, feigning disappointment. "That's low, Victoria. Even for you." "Low?" Victoria stepped into the light. "You have a child with a woman half your age, hidden in a company suite, and you're lecturing me on morals?" "I deserve happiness, Victoria," Preston shouted suddenly, his composure cracking. "I deserve a legacy. Look at you. You're cold. You're distant. And let's be honest, you couldn't give me the one thing a man in my position needs. A son. We agreed we would keep trying. We agreed to look into surrogacy," Victoria countered, her voice steady. "I didn't want a surrogate," Preston spat. "I wanted a real family. Chloe gives me that. She respects me. She looks up to me. She doesn't challenge me on every little decision like you do." He walked toward her, looming over her, trying to use his height to intimidate her. It was a tactic that had worked on his junior executives for years. "I'm filing for divorce, Victoria," he said, his voice dropping to a sneer. "And don't think you're going to take me to the cleaners. I've had the legal team reviewing the prenup for months. You get the beach house in the Hamptons and a monthly stipend for 3 years. That's it." "A stipend," Victoria repeated, arching an eyebrow. "Like an allowance?" "You haven't worked a day in the last 10 years, Preston scoffed. "I built this company. Langley Global is mine. My name is on the building. My face is on the magazines. You just planned the parties. You'll take what I give you, and you'll be grateful I'm generous enough not to leave you with nothing." He walked past her, brushing her shoulder roughly. "I have a press conference scheduled for Friday. I'm announcing the restructuring of the firm and my personal transition. I expect you to be moved out of the main residence by the weekend. Chloe and Leo will be moving in on Monday." He stopped at the door of the study, not even looking back. "Don't make this difficult, Victoria. You can't win against me. I have the board, I have the money, and I have the lawyers. You're just a housewife who aged out of her prime." Victoria waited until the door clicked shut. She waited until she heard his heavy footsteps retreat to the guest bedroom. He wouldn't even sleep in their bed tonight. Only then did she allow a small, icy smile to touch her lips. Preston thought he had reviewed the prenup. He thought he knew who owned Langley Global. He thought the name on the building mattered more than the names on the stock certificates. He had forgotten who Victoria was before she became a Langley. He had forgotten that her maiden name was Pembroke. And he had certainly forgotten the specific clauses of the emergency bailout agreement she had signed 5 years ago, when his genius almost bankrupted the company. She picked up her phone and dialed Arthur. "He took the bait," she said. "He thinks he's firing me." "And the paperwork?" Arthur asked on the other end. "Release the Kraken, Arthur," Victoria said, looking at the empty spot on the wall where their wedding photo used to hang. "I want the board meeting moved up to tomorrow morning, 9:15 a.m. sharp, and make sure the security team is present. I have a feeling the former CEO is going to make a scene when he finds out he's trespassing." The boardroom of Langley Global was a fortress of glass and steel, suspended 50 floors above the city. It was designed to intimidate, with a long mahogany table that shone like a dark mirror, and panoramic windows that offered a view of the empire Preston Langley believed he ruled. At 9:05 a.m., the double doors swung open. Preston strode in, radiating an aggressive vitality. He had slept well in the guest room, fueled by the adrenaline of his impending rebirth. He was wearing his best navy suit, a power tie, and a Rolex that cost more than most people's homes. But he wasn't alone. Walking a step behind him was Chloe. She was dressed in a white pantsuit that looked suspiciously bridal. She pushed a sleek, high-end stroller. The audacity of it was breathtaking. Preston wasn't just bringing his mistress to the office, he was bringing his illegitimate family to a board meeting. "Good morning, everyone," Preston boomed, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "Apologies for the slight delay. I had to ensure my guests were settled." He stopped short. Usually, the board members stood when he entered. Usually, the head of the table was empty, waiting for him to take his throne. Today, the room was deadly silent. The 12 board members, titans of industry like Charles Whitmore and Elena Rostova, were already seated. They didn't look up. They were all staring at the person sitting at the head of the table. Victoria. She was wearing a black tailored dress that looked like armor. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She didn't look like a scorned wife. She looked like a judge. "You're in my seat, Victoria," Preston said, his smile faltering just a fraction. He chuckled, trying to play it off for the board. "I think my wife is confused about the difference between the country club committee and a Fortune 500 board meeting." Victoria didn't blink. She didn't even look at him. She was reading a file in front of her, marking something with a red pen. "Victoria!" Preston snapped, his patience evaporating. "Get up! We have serious business to discuss. You are embarrassing yourself." Chloe shifted uncomfortably by the door, the stroller handle gripped tight in her manicured hands. "Preston? Maybe she doesn't know." "She knows," Preston growled. He turned to the board, spreading his hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this domestic disturbance. As you know, Langley Global is entering a new era, and frankly, it's time to cut the dead weight. My wife seems to be having trouble accepting that her role here, and in my life, has ended." Charles Whitmore, the chairman of the audit committee, finally looked up. He adjusted his spectacles. "Sit down, Preston. There is an empty chair at the end of the table." Preston's face flushed a deep crimson. "Excuse me? I am the CEO. I sit at the head." Not today, Victoria said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made the air conditioner hum seem loud. She finally looked up, her blue eyes piercing him. Sit down, Preston, or I will have security remove you before you can even introduce your assistant. Preston laughed, a harsh, incredulous bark. Security. I pay their salaries. You think you can barge in here and give orders? You're a housewife, Victoria. You're nothing without me. He turned to the board, deciding to go for the nuclear option. If he couldn't physically move her, he would destroy her reputation right there in front of the people she tried to impress. Since Victoria insists on being present, Preston sneered, pacing the room. Let's put everything on the table. I am filing for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. But the truth is that the company needs a leader with a legacy, a future. He gestured dramatically to Chloe and the baby. This is Chloe Sinclair, and this, he pointed to the stroller, is Leo, my son, my blood. A gasp went around the room, not of shock, but of scandalized horror. I have a son, Preston continued, his voice rising with manic pride. A biological heir. Victoria was unable to provide that. And while I pity her, deficiency, I cannot let Langley Global suffer for it. I am initiating a restructuring. I will be bringing Chloe on as the new Director of Communications to handle the transition. Victoria will be stepping down from her honorary position on the charity board, effective immediately. He pulled a manila envelope from his briefcase and slammed it onto the mahogany table. These are the divorce papers, Victoria. Consider yourself served. Now get the hell out of my chair. Preston stood there, chest heaving, waiting for the applause, waiting for the nod of approval from the men who understood that business was war and lineage was everything. Instead, silence stretched out, taut as a wire. Chloe looked around nervously. Preston, why aren't they saying anything? Victoria closed the file she was reading. The sound was a sharp snap. Are you finished? She asked. I'm finished with you. Preston spat. Good, Victoria said. She signaled to Arthur Pendleton, who was sitting to her right. Arthur, please read the minutes from the emergency trustee meeting held at midnight last night. Arthur Pendleton stood up. He didn't look at Preston. He looked at a document in his hands, his voice dry and devoid of emotion. At 12:01 a.m. this morning, the Pembroke Trust exercised its option under the 2021 bailout agreement, Arthur read. Specifically, Clause 14(b) regarding the conversion of debt to equity in the event of gross moral turpitude or instability of leadership by the acting CEO. Preston froze. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like he was about to faint. The 2021 agreement? That was just a loan. I paid the interest. You paid the interest, Victoria interrupted, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. But you never paid the principal, Preston. You were too busy buying yachts and setting up mistresses in company suites to pay back the $50 million my father's trust lent you when you ran this company into the ground 5 years ago. Preston stammered. But that was... We agreed I had 10 years. Read the clause, Arthur, Victoria commanded. In the event that the CEO engages in conduct that jeopardizes the reputation or stability of the firm, Arthur recited, the Pembroke Trust reserves the right to immediately convert the outstanding principal into Class A voting shares at a valuation of the 2021 stock price. Arthur lowered the paper and looked at Preston over his glasses. The valuation in 2021 was $4 a share. Today, it trades at $40. By converting the debt at the lower rate, the Pembroke Trust has effectively acquired an additional 400 million shares. Preston's mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. He looked at the board members. They were all looking at Victoria. What does that mean? Chloe asked, her voice shrill. Preston, what does that mean? It means, Victoria said, standing up slowly, that as of 12:05 a.m., I am the majority shareholder of Langley Global. I own 90% of the voting stock. I own the building. I own the chairs. I own the desk you're leaning on. She walked around the table, her heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. She stopped inches from Preston. He smelled of fear now. You don't own the board, Preston, she whispered. I do. You can't do this, Preston whispered, his eyes wild. I built this. I am the face of this company. You are a liability, Victoria corrected him. And you are fired. She turned to the board. I put forward a motion to terminate Preston Langley as CEO, effective immediately, for cause, including misappropriation of company funds for personal use, specifically the rental of Suite 404 and the expenses of Ms. Sinclair, and breach of fiduciary duty. Seconded, Charles Whitmore said instantly. All in favour? Victoria asked. Every single hand in the room went up. Motion carried, Victoria said calmly. She turned back to her husband. You are trespassing, Mr. Langley. Please hand over your company phone, your laptop, and your keycard. Preston staggered back, bumping into the table. No, you can't. I have rights. I have a son. He pointed at the stroller, as if the baby were a shield. Yes, you do, Victoria said, glancing at the baby with a look of genuine pity, not malice. And that child is going to need a father who is present, which is good, because you're going to have a lot of free time. However, since you brought up the divorce... She picked up the envelope Preston had slammed on the table and tossed it into the trash bin without opening it. My lawyers filed this morning, she said. Since you were fired for cause, your golden parachute severance package is void. The prenuptial agreement you were so fond of quoting last night. It has a fidelity clause. You violated it. Explicitly. On video. She tapped her phone. I get everything, Preston. The penthouse, the cars, the accounts, and yes, the beach house in the Hamptons. Preston looked at Chloe, desperate for support. Chloe, tell them. Tell them we're a team. Chloe looked from Preston, sweaty, red-faced and unemployed, to Victoria, who stood like a queen in her castle. The math was easy to do. You told me you owned the company, Chloe said, her voice shaking. You said she was just a figurehead. He lied to you, Victoria said to the girl. He lies to everyone. He used my money to build his ego, and he used your youth to boost his confidence. But the ride is over. Victoria pressed a button on the intercom console. Security to the boardroom. We have 2 intruders to escort out. 2 burly security guards, men Preston had nodded to every morning for 10 years, marched into the room. They didn't look at Preston. They looked at Victoria for orders. Escort Mr. Langley and Ms. Sinclair to the exit, Victoria said. They are not permitted to stop at their offices. Personal effects will be mailed to them. You can't do this to me, Preston screamed as a guard grabbed his arm. He tried to shake them off, his dignity shattering completely. I am Preston Langley. This is my name on the wall. Actually, Arthur Pendleton interjected, clearing his throat. The trademark for Langley Global is held by Pembroke Holdings. We'll be rebranding next week. I believe the board favors Pembroke Technologies. Preston let out a sound that was half sob, half scream as he was dragged toward the door. Chloe scrambled to grab the stroller, her face streaked with tears. She looked at Victoria one last time, expecting gloating, but Victoria just looked tired. Take the baby and go, Chloe. He's innocent in this. But choose your next step carefully. A man who cheats with you will cheat on you. And now he doesn't even have a checkbook to make up for it. The doors slammed shut. The silence returned to the boardroom. Victoria let out a long breath, her shoulders dropping half an inch. She looked around the table at the 12 faces watching her. "Now," Victoria said, sitting down in the leather chair at the head of the table, the chair that finally fit her perfectly. "Let's talk about the Singapore deal. I believe Preston was about to make a mess of it." The sidewalk outside the Langley Global Tower, soon to be Pembroke Technologies, was a chaotic swarm of flashing bulbs and shouting voices. It took exactly 12 minutes for the news of the boardroom coup to leak. In the age of digital information, the fall of a titan was faster than the speed of sound. Preston Langley, a man who had graced the cover of Forbes 3 times, stood on the concrete pavement, clutching a cardboard box filled with desk ornaments. The wind whipped his hair into his eyes. Beside him, Chloe struggled to balance the stroller and her purse, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a dozen camera crews. "Mr. Langley, is it true you were fired for embezzlement? Is this the Mistress? Is that the secret baby? Mr. Langley, comment on the stock price jumping 15% after your termination." That last question hit Preston harder than the security guard's grip had. The market wasn't crashing because he left. The market was celebrating. "No comment!" Preston screamed, pushing a microphone away. "Get that camera out of my face!" He looked around for his driver. His sleek black town car was usually parked right at the curb, engine idling, ready to whisk him away. It was there, but as Preston reached for the door handle, the lock clicked down. The window rolled down 2 inches. The driver, a man named Frank, who Preston had employed for 6 years, looked out apologetically. "Sorry, Mr. Langley. Mrs. Pembroke called. Company vehicles are for employees only. I have orders to return the car to the garage." "Frank, open the damn door!" Preston roared, pulling on the handle. "I hired you. I gave you a Christmas bonus." "Actually, sir, the bonus came from the HR budget, which Mrs. Pembroke signed off on. And I need this job. My wife is sick. I can't risk it." Frank rolled the window up. The car pulled away, merging into traffic, leaving Preston stranded on the curb with his mistress, his illegitimate son, and a box of useless trinkets. "Preston, everyone is looking," Chloe hissed, shielding her face with her designer handbag. "Call an Uber. Let's just go home." "Home," Preston muttered, dazed. He fumbled for his phone, his personal phone, not the company one he'd been forced to surrender. He opened the rideshare app and punched in the address of the penthouse. Destination, the Pinnacle Residences, Penthouse A. He requested a luxury SUV. He wasn't going to leave in a Honda Civic. Payment declined. Preston stared at the screen. He tried again. Payment declined. "Please update your payment method." "Damn it," he cursed, his fingers trembling. He switched to his Platinum Reserve card. Declined. He switched to the joint account debit card. Card deactivated. "She froze them," Preston whispered, the horror rising in his throat like bile. "She froze everything. The joint accounts, the credit lines. They were all tied to the main estate." "Preston, the baby is crying," Chloe whined. "Just get a cab." "I can't," Preston snapped, turning on her. "I don't have any cash. I haven't carried cash in 5 years." He looked around the circle of paparazzi, who were now documenting his inability to hail a ride. It was the ultimate humiliation. Finally, he spotted a yellow taxi dropping off a passenger. He ran over, practically throwing himself on the hood. "Take us to the Pinnacle," Preston told the driver, breathless. "I'll pay you when we get there. I have cash in the safe at the house." The driver, a gruff man who looked like he'd seen everything, eyed Preston's expensive suit and the cardboard box. "Cash on arrival? Meter runs fast, buddy. Just drive. The ride was silent and tense. Leo wailed the entire time, a high-pitched siren of distress that grated on Preston's frayed nerves. Chloe sat as far away from him as the back seat allowed, scrolling frantically through her phone, likely reading the headlines that were already destroying her reputation. The other woman. Meet the intern who toppled an empire. Mistress and baby escorted from HQ. When they arrived at the Pinnacle residences, the doorman, George, was standing outside. George had greeted Preston every evening with a smile and a tip of his hat. Today, George stood with his arms crossed over his chest. "Afternoon, Mr. Langley," George said, blocking the revolving door. "George, good, you're here," Preston said, reaching for his wallet to realize it was empty of cash. "Pay the cab driver, will you? I'll reimburse you from the safe upstairs." "I can't do that, sir," George said, stone-faced, "and I can't let you in." "Excuse me?" Mrs. Mrs. Langley, contacted the building management an hour ago. She has an exclusive lease on the penthouse. The locks have been recoded. Your name has been removed from the access list. "I live there!" Preston shouted, veins bulging in his neck. "My clothes are there. My watch collection." "Your personal effects are being packed by a moving company as we speak," George recited, clearly following a script. "They will be delivered to a storage unit in Queens. Here is the key and the address." George handed him a small brass key and a slip of paper. Preston stared at the paper. Queens. A storage unit. "Preston," Chloe said, her voice trembling. "The cab driver is waiting. The meter is still running." Preston looked at the cab driver, who was leaning out the window with a tire iron in his hand, looking less than patient. He looked at the luxury building he was barred from. He looked at Chloe. He took off his Rolex. It was a Submariner, worth $15,000. He handed it to the cab driver. "Take this. It's worth more than your car. Just take us to a hotel. Any hotel." "Preston, that was your favorite watch," Chloe whispered. "Shut up," Preston said, slumping against the cold brick of the building wall. "Just shut up." 3 days later, the definition of luxury had changed drastically for Preston Langley. He was currently pacing the floor of a room at the Sunset Motor Inn, a roadside motel near the airport that smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon polish. The wallpaper was peeling, and the carpet was a suspicious shade of brown. It was the only place that accepted cash up front without a credit card hold, paid for by pawning Chloe's diamond tennis bracelet, a gift he had bought her with company funds 3 months ago. "Stop pacing, you're making me dizzy," Chloe snapped. She was sitting on the edge of the sagging bed, filing her nails. The baby was asleep in a makeshift crib made from a dresser drawer padded with towels. "I have to pace, Chloe. I'm thinking," Preston yelled. He was unshaven, wearing the same suit from the board meeting, now wrinkled and stained with sweat. "You're not thinking," Chloe countered, her voice losing its sweetness by the hour. "You're panicking. You said you had lawyers. You said you had friends. Why is nobody calling you back?" Preston stopped and stared at his phone. It was a prepaid burner he'd bought at a convenience store because his service had been cut off. He had called everyone. He called Martin Hughes, his golf buddy, and a hedge fund manager. Martin's assistant said he was out of the country indefinitely. He called Senator Davidson, whose campaign he had donated heavily to. The number was disconnected. He called the top 3 divorce firms in the city. All of them cited a conflict of interest. Victoria had retained them all for consultations years ago, effectively checkmating him from hiring the best talent. "They're scared of her," Preston muttered. "She scorched the earth. She threatened them. She must have." "Or maybe they just know you're broke," Chloe said cruelly. "I saw the news, Preston. The lawsuit Victoria filed. She's suing you for the $50 million plus interest, personal liability. That means even if you get a job, she garnishes your wages for the rest of your life. I will get it back. Preston slammed his fist on the cheap laminate table. I just need a lawyer who isn't in her pocket. I have a meeting in an hour with someone, a guy named Saul. He's affordable. Affordable, Chloe scoffed. Great, from the best litigator in New York to a strip mall ambulance chaser. Preston ignored her and grabbed his jacket. Watch the baby. I'll be back with a strategy. The law office of Saul Goodman, no relation to the TV character, though the office was eerily similar, was sandwiched between a nail salon and a laundromat. Saul was a sweaty man with a stain on his tie and an office that was overflowing with files. He listened to Preston's story, chewing on the end of a pen. When Preston finished explaining the prenup, the bailout agreement, and the board vote, Saul let out a low whistle. "Wow," Saul said. "She got you good, Mr. Langley. I mean, really good. It's like a piece of art." "I don't need a critic. I need a defense," Preston snapped. "Can we fight the prenup? I signed it under duress." "Duress?" Saul laughed. "You signed it 10 years ago while drinking Cristal on a yacht. And the fidelity clause? You admitted to the affair on video, in front of witnesses, and then introduced the product of that affair to the board of directors. A judge isn't going to throw that out. A judge is going to frame it. What about the company? The bailout? That's Contract Law 101, Saul said, shrugging. You signed a debt-to-equity conversion agreement. It's standard. You defaulted on the moral clause. She exercised the option. It's clean, ruthless, but clean. So what are you telling me? Preston demanded, leaning forward. That I have nothing? I'm telling you that you have less than nothing, Saul said bluntly. You have massive debt. Victoria Pembroke is coming for the 50 million. You have no assets to seize. You're looking at bankruptcy, Mr. Langley. Chapter 7. Liquidation. Preston felt the room spin. Bankruptcy? I'm a CEO. You were a CEO, Saul corrected. Now you're an unemployed guy with a child support obligation and a furious ex-wife who owns the legal system. My advice? Move to a non-extradition country, or learn to say, welcome to Walmart. Preston stumbled out of the office, the bright afternoon sun blinding him. He felt like he was suffocating. He walked back to the motel, his feet dragging. He needed a drink. He needed to sleep. He needed Chloe to tell him he was still a genius, still a king. He pushed open the door to room 12. Chloe, the lawyer said we might have to declare bankruptcy, but we can restart. The room was empty. The dresser-drawer crib was overturned. The closet door was open, the few hangers bare. Chloe's suitcase was gone. The stroller was gone. On the unmade bed, there was a note written on the motel stationery. Preston, I called my parents. They're wiring me money for a ticket back to Ohio. I can't do this. I didn't sign up for poverty. I signed up for a life with a winner. I'm taking Leo. Don't try to find us. Honestly, you can't afford the child support anyway, so consider this a favor. Good luck with Victoria. You're going to need it. Chloe Preston stared at the note. He dropped it, watching it flutter to the dirty carpet. He was alone. No wife, no mistress, no son, no company, no money. He sat on the edge of the bed and put his head in his hands. For the first time in his life, Preston Langley cried. Not for his family, but for himself. His phone buzzed. It was a notification from a news app. Breaking. Pembroke Technologies announces record Q3 profits under new leadership. Victoria Pembroke named Businesswoman of the Year. Stock hits all-time high. Preston threw the phone against the wall. It shattered, the screen spiderwebbing into 1,000 pieces, much like his life. But even with the phone broken, he couldn't shut out the truth. He had built a house of cards on a foundation of arrogance, and Victoria had just blown it down. 6 months had passed since the boardroom coup that shook New York City's financial district. The winter snow had melted, revealing a spring that belonged entirely to Victoria Pembroke. Langley Global was a dead name, scrubbed from the facade of the skyscraper on Fifth Avenue. It was now Pembroke Technologies, and under Victoria's direct leadership, the company's stock had stabilized and then soared. She had pivoted the company toward green energy tech, a move Preston had always mocked as unprofitable hippie nonsense, but which had landed Victoria on the cover of Time magazine as the visionary of the year. Tonight was the celebratory gala for the company's rebranding. Poetically, Victoria chose to hold it at the Grand Hotel Sinclair, the exact location where her marriage had ended, in a hallway 6 months prior. Victoria stepped out of her limousine, the flashbulbs blinding her. She wore a dress of liquid silver, looking every inch the titan of industry she was born to be. She didn't look for her husband in the crowd. She didn't need to. He was a ghost, a cautionary tale told in business schools about the dangers of hubris. Inside, the ballroom was warm and smelling of expensive lilies. Arthur Pendleton, looking spry for his age, toasted her from the head table. "To the Queen of the Board," he said, raising his glass. "To the majority shareholder," the room echoed. Victoria smiled, but she felt a need for air. The adulation was intoxicating, but the memories of this place were still sharp. She excused herself, walking toward the terrace for a moment of quiet. She leaned against the stone balustrade, looking out at the city lights. "Excuse me, ma'am. Can I clear this for you?" The voice came from behind her. It was raspy, broken, yet achingly familiar. Victoria froze. She turned around slowly. Standing there, holding a tray of dirty champagne flutes, was a man in a waiter's uniform that was a size too large for his shrinking frame. His hair was graying at the temples, unkempt. His face was gaunt, the lines of stress etched deep into his skin. It was Preston. He dropped the tray. Glass shattered on the terrace stones, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Victoria?" he whispered. He looked at her, then down at his cheap polyester uniform, shame coloring his neck a deep red. He scrambled to pick up the broken glass with bare hands, cutting his finger in the process. "Leave it," Victoria said, her voice devoid of the warmth she used to reserve for him. "You'll only make a mess." Preston stood up, clutching his bleeding hand. I work here now. The agency. They placed me here. I didn't know it was your event, I swear. It's a big city, Preston, but I suppose gravity pulls everything to the bottom eventually." Preston let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Is that what I am? The bottom? You certainly made sure of that. No one will hire me. You blacklisted me." "I didn't blacklist you," Victoria corrected him calmly. "I simply publicized the truth. You embezzled funds. You violated fiduciary duties. You are a liability. The market decided your worth, Preston. Just like you used to say, you are what you earn." "I have nothing," Preston choked out, tears welling in his eyes. "Chloe left me. She took the boy. She's living with her parents in Ohio. I sent her $50 a week just so she doesn't block my number, but she won't let me see him. I sleep in a studio apartment in the Bronx that smells like mold. I used to be a CEO. He took a step toward her, his eyes desperate. "Victoria, please. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But this is cruel. You have everything. You have the millions, the company, the houses. Can't you just help me? A loan? A job in the mailroom? Anything?" He reached out a hand, the hand that used to wear a Rolex, the hand that had held his mistress's baby while plotting to destroy Victoria. Victoria looked at his hand. She remembered the photo on her phone. She remembered the word Baron. She reached into her silver clutch. Preston's eyes lit up with pathetic hope. Was she getting a checkbook? Cash? Victoria pulled out a single, crisp business card. It wasn't hers. "What is this?" Preston asked, taking it. "It's the number for a pro bono legal aid clinic on 42nd Street, Victoria said. "They help people file for bankruptcy and get back on their feet. It's a good program. I donate to it heavily." Preston stared at the card, his face crumbling. "That's it? A pamphlet?" "It's more than you left me with, Preston," Victoria said, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the night air. "You planned to leave me with nothing but a stipend and a broken heart. You planned to erase me. I'm simply letting you experience the world you tried to build for me." She turned back to the door, the silver fabric of her dress catching the moonlight. "Victoria," he shouted after her, his voice cracking. "I made you. You were just a Pembroke heiress. You were nothing without my ambition." Victoria stopped. She didn't turn around. She simply spoke over her shoulder. "You're right, Preston. I was a Pembroke. And Pembrokes don't get mad. We get ownership." She walked back into the warmth of the gala, the heavy glass doors sliding shut behind her, sealing out the cold and the man who used to be her husband. Outside, Preston Langley stood alone in the dark, clutching a card he was too proud to use, while the woman he underestimated toasted to a future that no longer included him. The silence was the loudest scream he had ever heard. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why you never bite the hand that holds the checkbook. Preston thought Victoria was just a trophy wife, a piece of furniture in his grand design. He mistook her silence for weakness and her kindness for stupidity. But he learned the hard way that in the game of life, the person who shouts the loudest isn't always the one in charge. It's the person who owns the majority share. Victoria didn't just walk away. She walked up. She turned her pain into power and her betrayal into a boardroom takeover. It's a savage reminder that the best revenge isn't screaming or fighting. It's living well, succeeding, and letting the karma of the universe and a really good lawyer do the rest. What would you have done if you were Victoria? Would you have given Preston a second chance, or was leaving him as a waiter the perfect punishment? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have plenty more tales of cheaters getting exactly what they deserve coming up next week. Thanks for watching, and remember, always read the fine print.